Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Part 4. Wherefore Sir Gawain bare the pentangle. Then they brought him his shield, which was a bright red, with the pentangle painted thereon in gleaming gold. And why that noble prince bare the pentangle I am minded to tell you, though my tale tarry thereby. It is a sign that Solomon set erewhile, as betokening truth, for it is a figure with 5 points, and each line overlaps the other, and nowhere hath it beginning or end, so that in English is called the endless knot. And therefore was it well suiting to this knight and to his arms, since Gawain was faithful in 5 and 5-fold, for pure was he as gold, void of all villainy, and endowed with all virtues. Therefore he bare the pentangle on his shield and surcoat, as truest of heroes and gentlest of knights. For first he was faultless in his 5 senses, and his 5 fingers never failed him, and all his trust upon the earth was in the 5 wounds that Christ bare on the cross, as the creed tells. And wherever this knight found himself in stress of battle, he deemed well that he drew his strength from the 5 joys which the Queen of Heaven had laid of her child. And for this cause did he bear an image of Our Lady on the one half of his shield, that whenever he looked upon it, he might not lack for aid. And the 5th 5 that the hero used were frankness and fellowship above all, purity and courtesy that never failed him, and compassion that surpasses all. And in these 5 virtues was that hero wrapped and clothed, and all these 5-fold were linked one in the other, so that they had no end, and were fixed on 5 points that never failed. Neither at any side were they joined or sundered, nor could ye find beginning or end. And therefore on his shield was the knot shapen, red gold upon red, which is the pure pentangle. Now was Sir Gawain ready, and he took his lance in hand, and bade them all farewell. He deemed it had been forever. How Sir Gawain went forth. Then he smote the steed with his spurs, and sprang on his way, so that sparks flew from the stones after him. All that saw him were grieved at heart, and said one to the other, By Christ, 'tis great pity that one of such noble life should be lost. I faith 'twere not easy to find his equal upon earth. The king had done better to have wrought more warily. Yonder knight should have been made a duke. A gallant leader of men is he, and such a fate hath beseemed him better than to be hewn in pieces at the will of an elfish man for mere pride. Who ever knew a king to take such counsel as to risk his knights on a Christmas jest? Many were the tears that flowed from their eyes when that goodly knight rode from the hall. He made no delaying, but he went his way swiftly and rode many a wild road, as I heard say in the book. Of Sir Gawain's journey. So rode Sir Gawain through the realm of Logres on an errand that he held for no jest. Often he lay companionless at night, and must lack the fare that he liked. No comrade had he save his steed, and none save God with whom to take counsel. At length he drew nigh to North Wales, and left the Isles of Anglesey on his left hand, crossing over the fords by the foreland over a holy head, till he came into the wilderness of Wirral, where but few dwelt who love God and man of true heart. And ever he asked, as he fared, of all whom he met, if they had heard any tidings of a green knight in the country thereabouts, or of a green chapel. And all answered him, nay, never in their lives had they seen any man of such a hue. And the knight wended his way by many a strange road and many a rugged path, and the fashion of his countenance changed full often ere he saw the green chapel. Many a cliff did he climb in that unknown land, where afar from his friends he rode as a stranger. Never did he come to a stream or ford, but he found a foe before him, and that one so marvelous, so foul and fell, that it behoved him to fight. So many wonders did the knight behold, that it was too long to tell the 10th part of them. Sometimes he fought with dragons and wolves. sometimes with wild men that dwelt in the rocks, another with bulls and bears and wild boars, or with giants of the high moorland that drew near to him. Had he not been a doughty knight, enduring and of well-proved valor, and a servant of God, doubtless he had been slain, for he was oft in danger of death. Yet he cared not so much for the strife. What he deemed worse was that when the cold, clear water was shed from the clouds and froze ere it fell on the fallow ground. More nights than enough he slept in his harness on the bare rocks, near slain with the sleet, while the streams leaped bubbling from the crest of the hills and hung in hard icicles over his head. Thus, in peril and pain and many a hardship, the knight rode alone till Christmas Eve, and in that tide he made his prayer to the Blessed Virgin that she would guide his step and lead him to some dwelling. On that morning he rode by a hill and came into a thick forest, wild and drear. On each side were high hills and thick woods below them of great hoar oaks, 100 together, of hazen and hawthorn, with their trailing boughs intertwined, and rough, ragged moss spreading everywhere. On the bare twigs, the birds chirped piteously for the pain of the cold. The knight upon Gringolet rode lonely beneath them, through marsh and mire, much troubled at heart lest he should fail to see the surface of the Lord, who in that self-same night was born of a maiden for the cure of our grief, and therefore he said, sighing, I beseech thee, Lord, and Mary, thy gentle mother, for some shelter where I may hear mass, and thy matins at morn. This I ask meekly, and thereto I pray my paternoster, Ave and Credo. Thus he rode praying and lamenting his misdeeds, and he crossed himself and said, May the cross of Christ speed me. How Sir Gawain came to a fair castle on Christmas Eve. Now the knight had crossed himself but thrice ere he was aware in the wood of a dwelling within a moat above a lawn, and on a mound surrounded by many mighty trees that stood round the moat. 'Twas the fairest castle that ever a knight owned, built in a meadow with a park all about it, and a spiked palisade, closely driven, that enclosed the trees for more than 2 miles. The knight was ware of the hold from the side, as it shone through the oaks. Then he lifted off his helmet, and thanked Christ and St. Julian that they had courteously granted his prayer and hearkened to his cry. Now, quoth the knight, I beseech ye, grant me fair hostel. Then he pricked Gringolet with his golden spurs and rolled gaily toward the great gate and came swiftly to the bridge end. The bridge was drawn up and the gates closed shut. The walls were strong and thick so that they might fear no tempest. The knight, on his charger, abode on the bank of the deep double ditch that surrounded the castle. The walls were set deep in the water and rose aloft to a wondrous height. They were of hard-hewn stone up to the corbels, which were adorned beneath the battlements with fair carvings, and turrets set in between with many a loophole. A better barbican Sir Gawain had never looked upon. And within he beheld the high hall with its tower and many windows with carven cornices, and a chalk-white chimneys on the turreted roof that shone fair in the sun. And everywhere, thickly scattered on the castle battlements, were pinnacles, so many that it seemed as if it were all wrought of paper, so white was it all. The knight on his steed deemed it fair enough, if he might come to be sheltered within it, to lodge there, while that the holy day lasted. He called aloud, and soon there came a porter of kindly countenance, who stood on the wall and greeted this knight, and asked his errand. Good sir, quoth Gawain, wilt thou go mine errand to the high lord of the castle, and crave for me lodging? Yea, by St. Peter, quoth the porter. In sooth, I trow that ye be welcome to dwell here, so long as it may like ye. How Sir Gawain was welcomed. Then he went and came again swiftly, and many folk with him to receive the knight. They let down the great drawbridge and came forth and knelt on their knees on the cold earth to give him worthy welcome. They held wide open the great gates, and courteously he bid them rise and rode over the bridge. Then men came to him and held his stirrup while he dismounted, and took and stabled his steed. There came down knights and squires to bring the guest with joy to the hall. When he raised his helmet, there were many to take it from his hand, fain to serve him, and they took from him sword and shield. Sir Gawain gave good greeting to the noble and the mighty men who came to do him honor. Clad in his shining armor, they led him to the hall, where a great fire burnt brightly on the floor, and the lord of the household came forth from his chamber to meet the hero fitly. He spake to the knight and said, "Ye are welcome to do here as it likes ye. All that is here is your own, to have at your will and disposal." "Gramercy," quoth Gawain, "may Christ requite ye." As friends that were fain each embraced the other, and Gawain looked at the knight who greeted him so kindly, and thought 'twas a bold warrior that owned that burg. Of mighty stature he was, and of high age. Broad and flowing was his beard, and of a bright hue. He was stalwart of limb, and strong in his stride, and his face fiery red, and his speech free. In sooth, he seemed one well fitted to be the leader of valiant men. Then the lord led Sir Gawain to a chamber, and commanded folk to wait upon him, and at his bidding there came men enough who brought the guest to a fair bower. The bedding was noble, with curtains of pure silk wrought with gold, and wondrous coverings of fair cloth all embroidered. The curtains ran on ropes with rings of red gold, and the walls were hung with carpets of orient, and the same spread on the floor. There, with mirthful speeches, they took from the guest his briny and all his shining armor, and brought him rich robes of the choicest in its stead. They were long and flowing, and became him well, and when he was clad in them all, who looked on the hero thought that surely God had never made a fairer knight. He seemed as if he might be a prince without peer in the field, where men strive in battle. Then before the hearth-place, whereon the fire burned, they made ready a chair for Gawain, hung about with cloth and fair cushions, and there they cast around him a mantle of brown samite, richly embroidered, and furred within with costly skins of ermine, with a hood of the same. And he seated himself in that rich seat, and warmed himself at the fire, and was cheered at heart. And while he sat thus, the serving men set up a table on the trestles, and covered it with a fair white cloth, and set thereon salt cellar, and napkin, and silver spoons. And the knight washed at his will, and set him down to meat. The folk served him courteously with many dishes seasoned of the best, a double portion. All kinds of fish were there, some baked in bread, some broiled on the embers, some sodden, some stewed, and savored with spices, with all sorts of cunning devices to his taste. And often he called it a feast, when they spake gaily to him all together, and said, "Now take ye this penance, and it shall be for your amendment." Much mirth thereof did Sir Gawain make. And I think we'll pause here, and we'll continue with this story in the next video. Thanks so much for joining us. Hey, please reach down, click like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below. We'd love to hear from you. I love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.